In this video, we're going to be looking at texturing a 3D sword. So this model's already been baked and I have painted the vertex ID. So here you can see we've got different colours, which means we can drag textures onto separate parts of the mesh while just using one texture up here. If you're unsure on how to do any of those things, I'll leave a link in the description to some of my other videos covering those topics. So we'll start off with the handle. So we'll go for a worn leather chest we'll use as our material here, and we'll control and drag this onto the handle. Now we'll stay with this colour for now, but we might want to tweak that a bit later. And then next we'll go for a steel material. So we'll go for stained steel here, and we'll put this on firstly our blade, like so, and then we'll also put this on the guard and the pommel, like so. Now as you can see, just adding a few textures has already made this look reasonably good. We're just going to tweak a few of these just to make it look even better. So let's start off with the blade itself. So let's go and find some occlusion. Now we'll go with the dust occlusion. We'll try that and see what that looks like. Now it's worth noting that this will be white to begin with. That's absolutely fine. Okay, so we've seen that. Let's just hide that quickly and let's try out another occlusion and see which we prefer. So I prefer this one a bit more. Looks like it's been used a little bit more, so we'll go with this one. So we'll delete the other one. We'll just name this dust occlusion. Or we'll just name it dust. And we'll change this and change the colour of this to a darker grey. Something like so. Yeah, I like that, so we'll stick with that. And then next we'll go with some dirt, so it looks like it's seen a bit of action, and we'll go with a smart mask here. Maybe we try out some dirt cavities here, see what that looks like. So this one's just similar to the occlusion here, so in this case I'm not going to use this one. So let's try some dirt splashes here. So that's much better. Now you could almost have this as a reddish colour if you want it to have that bloody sort of effect, just as an example. Maybe something like that. In fact, we'll stick with that. The other option would be you could have dirt splashes, so you could have more browny sort of colour. But we'll stick with the red. Now the other thing I want to do on the blade is I'm going to add some edge wear. So again, it looks like it's been used, and or the edges look a bit sharper. So we'll go with edges Uber here. You can see that also gives us a bit of an effect here on the sides. Now what we could do is, if say we just like the edges, is we could paint off this bit, which could be a possibility. Let's just hide that for now and let's try another one and see what we prefer. So again, this is quite similar. Again, we'll hide that. We'll try another one. You can see this gives us more of the edge we're after in terms of making it look a bit sharper. So what we might do here is we might go with a combination of the two. So in which case we might add a mask and paint off these bits here. But first, before we do that, let's just double check. So let's go to the colour here, and what we'll do is we'll make it metallic, and then we'll see what that looks like. So you can see that does make the edges look a bit sharper. And what you might want to do is you might just want to tweak the colour a little bit, so it's a bit more subtle, like so. And in fact, in this case, we might actually just keep that as is. So I quite like the effect on the middle parts of the sword and at the top. But again, you might want to add a paint layer and just, or a mask, and just remove these bits. It's totally up to you. So I'm quite happy with that blade now. So now we'll move on to the pommel. So we'll just call this edge quickly before we do so. And we'll remove these two, and we'll call this one blood. Although one more thing I might do quickly is I might just get some soft dust. We'll just see what this looks like. So if we change the colour here to red, so it's a bit more obvious what we can see. We might leave that. Let's just hide that quickly and we'll try another one again. So let's go with dust surface here. And again, let's just change the colour just so we can see it. So I much prefer this one here. So now that we're happy with that, I'm going to change it to more of a dusty colour, like so, more of a light brown. That might be a little bit too much. So we might tone it down a bit, like so. And we'll turn the roughness up a bit. As it is dust, it's not particularly shiny, is it? And maybe we even put the height up ever so slightly. Now if we go to our mask here, we can turn the opacity down a little bit. So as you see, we turn that off, it completely goes. So we might just go with 15 there, just so it's ever so subtle, like so. And we'll just name that dust coat. And we'll get rid of this one. Now that I'm happy with the blade, I'm going to move on to the guard. So before I do so, what I'll do is I'll just move this up here, and I'll put this all in a folder called blade. Just makes it a bit tidier and a bit easier to work with. So next we'll do the guard, like so. And for this I'll do similar, so I'll do an occlusion mask. And if we want to see what impact that will have, we can scroll down here and look at the ambient occlusion. So you can see there's a bit around here, there's a little bit on the edge there, and there's a bit around here. So it's not going to have a massive impact, but it's just a nice small subtle change that we can do. So let's drag that onto here like so, and then we'll just hide this one and let's try another one. So I much prefer this one, it's a bit more subtle. So we'll just call this dust rock. And for this again we'll go for a more darker colour, so it almost looks like a bit of shadow on it. So that might be a bit too strong, so again in this case what we'll do is just turn down the opacity a bit. So similar to the edge here, the blade, I'm going to add something to the edges here to make it look a bit more worn. So again, let's just try a few here. So let's go with gun edges here, see what that does. Now I quite like this, so I might actually stick with this. And what we'll do is if we turn this up to fully metallic, see it looks part of the sword. Then I might just make this ever so slightly darker. And I might tweak the height map ever so slightly. So if we go down to maybe a 0.1, you can see there's a few scratches in it, makes it look a bit more worn, which is quite nice. And that might be something you want to add to the blade itself as well. It's totally up to you. So after that, I just want a bit more dirt on it, maybe some dirt splashes here. I quite like the look of that, so we'll stick with that. We'll go for more brown colour. Like so. That almost looks ever so slightly rusty as well, so I quite like that. We'll turn up the roughness a bit here. And we'll just turn down the opacity. So you can see it's a very subtle change, but it adds a bit more character to it, I think. So I'm quite happy with that now. So now we'll move on to the last bit, which is the pommel. And we're going to go for similar here. We're going to add a bit more dirt, maybe a bit of dust. And we'll also add a decal. So before we do so, let's just name this dirt. We'll name this edges. And we'll create a new folder called guard. So if we take these, pop those in, and then we pop in the steel stained. There we go. Again, just tidying it up a bit, making it a bit easier to work with. So here, let's start off with the edges. I quite liked the gun edges on the other one, so let's try that. Again, I'm quite a big fan of that. So we'll do similar. We'll go up to here, we'll change it all the way up to metallic. And we'll just make it a bit darker again, like so. And then we will change the height. So 0.1, 0.01 worked well last time, so let's try that. I quite like that, so we'll stick with it. And then if again we go for occlusion mask, I'll make this quite dark. So. And then before we get onto the alpha, let's add some more dirt. So let's try dirt splashes again. So we change this to red just so we can see what it does. I think that's almost a bit too subtle. So let's try another one. Let's go with dirt spots. So now I quite like that. So let's change the colour to a dark brown again. And that is ever so slightly visible. So I might actually go for a lighter brown here. Like so. So let's get rid of the old one. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add an alpha on top of this. So if we go to, let's go for a Celtic design. So let's go with this one in this case, like so. Now obviously that's way too big at the moment. Let's just name this alpha, we'll name this dirt. Name this one edges. And we'll call this one arc for occlusion. Now I'm going to put the alpha underneath the dirt here, so it looks like the dirt is on top of the pommel itself and the alpha isn't on top of the dirt, as that look a bit out of place. So if we change this here, so if we come down to the scale, let's just try 0.1. That's obviously too big still. So let's go with 0.05. Again, too big. So maybe 0.03. Let's try that on all three for now. You can see that's quite a nice size. What we might want to do is might just want to rotate this a bit more as well. So if we go with something like that, say, that looks a bit better. I still think that's a bit too big, so what we'll do is we'll go 2.5 here, just make it ever so slightly smaller, like so. You can see that's much better. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the color and we're going to change it to metallic. We'll change, in fact, let's turn all of these off and we'll just affect the height. So you've got a choice here. You can either have it indented in the pommel or you can have it sticking out. Totally up to you. So I can have it sticking out, but I think that's a bit too strong. And there you go, I think that's much better. But yeah, what you could do is you could turn that down to minus and have it indented. It's all preference. And then what we'll do is we'll just copy and paste that. And we'll drag it around. Like so. And then again, we'll just tweak it so it's in the right position. So let's tweak the rotation. Like so. Now you might want to spend a bit more time than me here getting it perfect, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'm happy with that. And overall, I'm quite happy with the result here. So what we'll do is we will just tidy it up. We'll call this one pommel, and we'll just drag these in. Like so. drag in the steel stained as well. Now I'm actually quite happy with the handle here, so I'm not going to tweak any of that, but what you might want to do is change, say, the base colour. You might want to change the leather itself. But as I said, I'm quite happy with the result here, so we'll leave this as is. And there you have it, that is our textured 3D sword. Now what you can do next is you can render this out. Again, I've got another video covering that, so if you want to check that out, look in the description below. Be sure to comment what you want to see next, and I will see you in the next one.